Hi everybody, we have a different kind of video in store for you today. Today we are going to attempt our floor. So we have a 2015 Keystone Passport Ultra Light, and what typically happens to trailers, and specifically ultralight trailers, is the floor gets soft. The way that they make these is they will put a little sheet of glue on, some foam, and then another little sheet of glue on, and then your vinyl, and that is the floor, and that is what you walk on. When you spend as much time in your trailer as we do, over time that foam decompresses and it gets soft in different spots of the floor. So we started noticing this a few years ago, and we've just kind of tolerated it, but now we're kind of to the point where it spreads so much where it's uncomfortable to walk on, and it's starting to be a pretty big problem that we kind of need to tackle. So I've done some research, I've watched some YouTube videos, and there is a cheat way that people kind of fix their floors by using epoxy. Otherwise, you have to start with brand new floor. You got to take everything out, you're putting new wood in, it's a big pain. We don't really want to do that. So today, that is our project. So when I say soft spots, here's a good example of one. You can see, and I can actually hear it squeaking. And feel some ridges in here of the soft spot. So this is one of the bad ones. So I had some chalk, and what I did is I kind of did this tap dance on the floor to figure out where the soft spot areas are. Not all of this that I have encircled here is bad, but it's soft. Some are better than others. So I did that with my yellow chalk just to kind of get an outline of where my soft spots are. Then I took some green chalk and I tried to outline along the edges here, along the seams, where I want to cut. So instead of just cutting straight across, I thought that might be a terrible idea. I'm going to try to cut in the seams, and maybe when I glue this piece back together, it might not look as bad. So I'm outside my circle here. This is all good spot. But when I get inside the circle, that's when we have trouble. You can see it moving beneath my feet. All right, are we ready? Are we sure we're wanting to do this? I'm so nervous. We could have a bigger problem here if this doesn't work. For some reason in the other videos I watched, nobody showed them cutting. I don't really know why. I know it's a little bit of a tedious part, but it is part of the process. I'm not really sure why you wouldn't show all of the process. So here is our floor. This is the Luan, and you can see it's cracked. So this was that spot, the real bad one that I was showing earlier, and obviously that's why the Luan here has cracked, and so that's why there's such a soft spot here. And we're actually seeing in this crack here how thick it actually is. It's like only a 1/4 inch thick. That is the top of our floor. So here, you see that? Move your finger. That's foam. That's the foam. So after a trip to the hardware store, we have a fresh sheet of glue on. So now my goal is just to cut this cracked area out. Alright, so I have the area outlined that I plan to cut out. I didn't want to get too close to the edges of my vinyl seam here, and unfortunately this crack goes far underneath, and we're just going to have to sacrifice that section. But I've got this little rectangle outlined, so now my plan is, because I only want to cut the Luan, I don't want to cut into the foam if I don't have to. So I've got this block here and I've got my jigsaw, and so my Luan is only 1/4 inch thick or whatever, so I don't need a whole lot to go in. So my plan is just to cut along the lines with the block here. So here's our cutout. So you can see we have found a support here, and we found that the hard way. We kind of did cut into it. But here is our foam, and here's an example of what we cut out, and you can see the sandwich here. So this Luan is glued to the foam, and over time it has depressed, and you can see it moving here. And that is what we've been walking on. So now this side was actually pretty good, and you can see the glue was still attached pretty well between the foam and the Luan. So this is obviously the bad side. This side is also a little rough. So next we have some new Luan. We're going to cut a piece of that. We're going to stick it in here, glue it down. We have our boards cut, so we got some new underlayment. We have this smaller piece here, which is going to fit in this section right here. This is our worst section. It has been since the beginning, and so we're going to just give it an extra layer here. So we don't need as much epoxy to fill in this area. So I'm going to glue these two together, and then we have our bigger piece that I'm going to glue in place. I've got this construction adhesive to help me glue all of this together, and then I'm going to glue this little flub that we did, unfortunately. So over here I have my new board resting, gluing. I decided to tackle this soft area, and look, I am totally not surprised. Campers are notorious for having water damage near the door, so this is not super unexpected. It is of course a bummer, and we have a little bit of a bigger problem maybe. Oh, and of course we have another crack to deal with, and a random screw. Alright, another day of hard work is over on this floor. So we cut out all the mess that was here, and I cut out the crack that was here, and this was quite a pain to get all of that rotted stuff out. It took, to do all of this, took a good 3 hours solid tonight. It was so rotted, it was just layered and layered, and the wood had expanded. It was such a pain, and some of it was not bad at all. Like you can see here where it's a little bit deeper in this corner especially. It was still glued on pretty good, and so just pretty much the top layer was rotted. A little bit of the styrofoam here is discolored. I'm not super convinced we have a major leak. I kind of more attribute this to me probably just leaving the door open when it rains, because I kind of like it, but maybe I shouldn't do that. But either way, tomorrow we'll cut out a new board, and then we will have once again one solid floor and one step closer to epoxy. All right, we have our new boards cut out. They fit in pretty good, luckily, and even just having the rot from the top board replaced here has made it a lot nicer already. So I'm going to get this glued, and then later we will put some epoxy in both of these areas now, and then that should firm the floor up quite nicely. Here's some lovely footage of me trying to glue. Yes, I know I glue like a 4th grader. Don't ask who taught me how to glue. I am self-taught. All right, I've got everything glued here and weighted down so that it is as flush as possible. And I know I've got some gaps in the edges that I will figure out what to do with later once my board is all glued, both of them. So we'll let this sit for a couple hours. So I just marked all my X's of where I want my holes to be. So again, I got my fancy chalk out and I went around and marked in green all the soft areas that I wanted to encompass. And then in most videos that you will watch, everybody does a 6x6 grid. Now that works for them. It didn't quite work for me because I had to replace some boards here. And so we wanted to make sure that we got close to the boards on the sides. So we tried to follow the 6 inches as much as possible, but we made the grid work for our area. And so now we have this area marked as well. And you can see, well, actually you probably can't see all the X's. And then we also used a stud finder to find where the support beams are, because I don't want to put a hole in the middle of my support beams. That makes no sense. So now we're going to get these drilled. I got all my holes drilled, 83 in total, 39, 44. I think those are my numbers. The holes went pretty good. I marked my drill bit. It was a 7/16 drill bit. I marked it 1 inch. However, you know pretty quickly when you get through this top and into the foam. And so as soon as I hit the foam, I stopped, which was obviously less than 1 inch. So some I kind of went in a little deeper. Checked underneath, no poke throughs, so that's fantastic. So gonna get my work area cleaned up. So I'm ready to mix my epoxy. I'm using this Kestrel deep pour epoxy brand, just found on Amazon, and it's a 2-to-1 ratio. I've got a little bucket here that I'm just gonna mix, and I'm not gonna do a ton at a time. And then I got these automotive syringes, so I'll suck up the epoxy and I'll inject it into the holes and just go along. So filling the holes is quick and slow at the same time. You can tell they absorb really quickly. I've already filled these several times and just am trying to keep them topped off as much as I can. But there are a lot of areas in here that we had some pretty big gaps in the foam, so all of that is going to fill in. Plus, it's got to absorb in the foam where possible. And everybody said you use more resin than you think, so that is what I'm seeing. And that's okay. I've got a few gallons that I've ordered just in case. But these ones are getting pretty full because when I try to refill them, it doesn't take long for them to bubble over. Well, all 88 of my holes have been epoxied. Some filled faster than others. Others were just bottomless pits. So at some point I just called it on those. It just felt like I was just going to be there forever filling them. So I went through, I tapped them all off, and I ended up going through a gallon and 24 ounces, I believe. And so now we'll let this cure for 48 hours. And this was a very long process. It took about 3 hours to fill all these holes. Today was the moment of truth walking on this floor. It is very firm. However, I'm being a little picky, and there are a few spots where I have marked some X's where I'd like it a little harder. Since I already have everything already off, it's not really that big of a deal to fill again in a few extra spots. This section, however, this is incredible. It's so firm here. I had no idea anything ever happened. I'm pretty pleased with how this one turned out. So I'll add some extra epoxy to that little section there, and then in the meantime I can work on filling these gaps and the holes there with some wood filler, sanding those down, and then getting this vinyl back in place. Okay, so the next task that I have that was kind of unexpected is the back of the vinyl here was all full of rotten, probably mold here. So I have a bleach water solution that I'm just spraying on, and then I'm going to try to clean this up so it's not such a mess. It was not in my plan to get new flooring, so I'm planning to just reuse the old flooring. I've got this little scraper here that I still have some wood pieces glued to it. Alright, so this is probably as good as it's gonna get. It's stained, but it's at least smooth again and not gross. So I'm gonna rinse it off with some warm water and then let it dry before we put it on the floor. It's been another couple of days since I put the second batch of epoxy in, and the floor is much better. It's pretty impressive. I wouldn't say that it is perfect and that there are still some marginally soft spots, but it is a lot nicer. So I'm going to work on getting these holes sanded and all my glue sanded down so that I can get back to camping. So I've got all of my holes and seams here filled and sanded down. So now I'm going to do some vacuuming, clean it up. Everything feels really great. And then I will work on the vinyl. Alright, so I have my floor all vacuumed up pretty good. So now I'm just going to give it a very light wipe down so there's no dust before I glue it, just so it's clean. So now I'm going to glue down some of my loose flaps that I have on the floor. I'm choosing this 3M 90 spray adhesive. Now, you can't use every spray adhesive with different types of flooring, and I struggled to figure out, is this linoleum or is this vinyl? All along I thought it was vinyl. I'm now thinking it's linoleum, and I can actually use linoleum with this spray, so that's what I'm going with. So the reason why I'm gluing some of this floor that's already on the floor is because where I cut some of these free corners and planks here, they've started to curl up. Even though we've tried to keep them down and flat and been using blocks to try to keep them flat, they've still kind of curled up a little. And so in order to glue my next piece down, I can't have this in the air. I need it to be flush with the ground so that when I come in and I put my seam sealing glue along, it's gonna adhere nicely. I think today is finally the day that we have a fully assembled floor. So I have this section of linoleum, which I'm assuming now, that I'm going to put down, and I'm going to work in just kind of increments because I have a seam sealer here and then I have this adhesive. So the seam sealer is going to work on gluing the seams together from what I've cut and then what is currently on the floor, and then this adhesive here is going to just basically glue the rest of it down to the floor. And so I'm just going to work in little sections as I go. This has like a 15-minute work time, and this needs to wait like for bonding 1 to 2 minutes before I can stick it down. So I've got plenty of time. It's just going to be a little bit of a process. And with this one, I kind of used a little bit of it last night. There might be others out there. This one doesn't dry clear, and that kind of drove me nuts a little bit. You can't really see unless you're really staring at the seams, but I can see it, so that kind of drives me nuts. But otherwise, I think everything is ready to go back to normal. Well, I've got one side laid down. Can you tell where my seams are? Boy, some I can, some I cannot. I see, if I get down real close, I can see some white of the glue. And I did notice as I go along, because I try to pinch the seams together, I ended up being like a millimeter or 2 off, which doesn't really matter. I'm not really worried about this area because I'm gonna put this rug over it. Nobody's gonna know. And they lay pretty smooth. So now I will work on my second area over here. I've got this piece just sitting in. I had this wrinkle in here from the rotted spot where over time this linoleum just kind of sagged down, and now it's all wrinkled. So I applied some hair dryer heat to it, and I'm trying to weight that down. So we'll see how that turns out, but ready for my last piece.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Something wrong with us.
All my floor is glued down. I am super happy to have like one sheet of floor now. It went together pretty well. Not perfect, but it went pretty good. A lot of my seams you can't really tell, some you can see. But so far things are good. So to finish off, I'm going to put a bead of silicone just around and seal up this area since we had the rut happen here. We certainly don't want that to happen again, so I'll seal that up. The other thing I'm doing is I have this butyl tape which I put over the holes here, and so how that works is when you screw down in, they'll get sealed up by this tape. This project went okay. It took me a bit longer than I actually expected. There are a couple things that I would do differently. When we tore up the cracked Luan or mason board, whatever this is, some of it came up with some foam attached to it. And that's actually quite a lot. And if you think about what the epoxy is doing, it's basically filling those gaps. And so when you take out a lot of this foam, that's a lot of epoxy to try to replace. So what I would have done differently next time is I would add a lot of this back in where I could, because then that's less epoxy and it's more sturdy in those areas. The other thing that I would do differently is when I put my new boards in, I really would have liked something underneath the two boards, because where the joints are, you can tell when you step on those where they are. It would have been nice to have something underneath to support both of those. So if I did it again, those are the two things that I would change. Otherwise, the project went pretty good. The floor is pretty good. I am so excited to have a floor that I can walk across and not feel like I'm gonna fall in. So thank you for watching this video. If you're expecting this video to be a 100% perfect project, you're watching the wrong person. My job is pretty much let's just try to fix it as best we can and call it good and then move on and go have fun. Well, we have been living in our trailer for a few weeks now, like normal, and I wanted to provide an update on the floor. Everything is still pretty much okay. None of my seams have come up. Everything that I glued has stayed glued, so I'm super happy about that. The area by the door is completely solid. There's no issues with that one whatsoever. The area by the kitchen though, that one I'm a little bit disappointed with. When we left, the floor was very solid, and since we've been on the road and we take our trailer down washboard roads, gravel, like we take it places we probably shouldn't, and I think that has shifted this area a little bit. It's a bit softer than I would prefer. It's still better than it was, 100% still better, but I still feel some softness in this area. I don't think I put near as much epoxy as I did in this area as I did by the door. And also I mentioned, you know, I took more foam out of this area and I wish I would have added some back in. So I think if I would have added some more foam back in, I probably wouldn't be feeling a little bit of softness like I am now. But like I said, again, it's still much better. I'm still glad I did the project. Things are okay with it, and I am much happier than I was originally. So thanks again for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to try and help you on that journey as well.